Welcome back to my series of Daredevil reviews. I already covered Season 1 last week, and I am now covering Season 2. And after Matt Murdock gets his new red and black suit and gets the name Daredevil, he learns about this new vigilante around Hell's Kitchen that's killing a bunch of gangs and criminals. And he finds out that that vigilante is named Frank Castle, played by Jon Bernthal, who calls himself the Punisher. And both Matt, Karen, and Foggy have to work together to learn more about Frank and stop him from taking more lives. But at the same time, and unfortunately for Matt, not a good time, his ex-girlfriend Elektra Nachos comes back, played by Elodie Young. She comes back and makes things more complicated for Matt to handle because she needs his help to learn more about this new group called The Hand that want to take over New York City. Season 2 of Daredevil is another great season where it takes the characters that we loved from the first season and puts them in a very, very tough situation. And then things get more chaotic for our three main leads when they take this case, which leads to some very serious problems, not just with the courtroom scenes, but in their personal lives as well, making their lives feel like that they are going through hell. And that's what I loved about this season. It takes our three main characters and puts them in a situation that makes things more chaotic. Like with Matt, for instance, he's trying to learn more about Frank Castle and what his backstory is and why he has to take this case to get rid of him, and he has to help Karen and Foggy try to deal with that issue. But at the same time, Elektra is also back in his life and is starting to make things worse for him, where Elektra is spending more time with him and taking him to other places to get rid of certain gangs where she got herself in trouble from. But Matt wants nothing to do with Elektra after their relationship fell apart, but unfortunately he's forced to help her, so he's got no other choice. And that's why I do still love this season. It continues what made the first season great and focuses more on the characters dealing with real problems, making them feel like people, not just with Matt, but you also get some character growth from Foggy and Karen, where Foggy is forced to step up more as a lawyer, where he has to take his job more seriously now and he's no longer popping small jokes every once in a while. And that's where you start to feel like that Foggy is finally coming into his own and he's not always asking for Matt's help in a bad situation. And the same goes to Karen. Without giving anything away, she also comes into her own as a character, where she learns more about Frank Castle and his backstory, where she has to do some pretty crazy and sometimes stupid stuff to get some more evidence on Frank not just being crazy and a murderer, but also a broken person that thinks he's doing the right thing. But Frank is just doing it in the way that Daredevil would never do, and that is kill criminals. Speaking of Frank Castle, let's talk about him for a moment. He is a broken person with a very tragic backstory and doesn't feel any guilt when he kills mobs, gangs, and criminals around New York. And that's mostly because of his tragic backstory, which I'm not going to get into spoilers of what that is, but when you do learn his backstory, he starts to feel more like a sympathetic character and you understand where he's coming from. Jon Bernthal is excellent in this show. He gives emotion to the character very well in this show and in his own show as well, and he gives some likability to his character when he only has like a couple of lighthearted moments. And a good example of how Jon Bernthal makes it work is that there's this one scene with him and another character at a cemetery where he talks about how happy his life was back then and how that started to fade away from him. And Frank Castle is one of those characters where you do understand where he's coming from. You don't agree why he's doing it, but you get it. And that has some great moments with both Daredevil and Punisher talking to each other about how they take down criminals, because the Punisher kills his victims, but Daredevil doesn't. He just takes them down. Where they also have a great scene where Daredevil is chained up on a rooftop and both him and Frank Castle are talking about how they take down their enemies, where Daredevil tries to tell Frank that killing criminals is wrong, but Frank doesn't think so. He just likes doing it, and that that shows more of the character side. Just like in season 1, this season has some great action sequences where they still feel dark and gritty and brutal, and they have another hallway fight scene where Matt is in full costume and he has a gun duct taped to his hand, but there are no bullets inside, and a group of guys are running towards him. He pulls the gun out and he pulls the trigger in front of him, but nothing comes out. The criminals freak out and he goes and he starts beating them all up throughout this hallway and later around a staircase. For me, this is on par with the hallway fight scene from season 1, and also on par with the hallway fight scene from season 3, which we'll talk about that one soon. Another thing I love about this show and in this season is the lighting. I didn't mention this in my review for season 1, but I love the way this show uses the lighting and color throughout all 3 seasons, where in the nighttime scenes it shows yellow lighting that's supposed to give the feel of Hell's Kitchen a very dark and gritty atmosphere, while also having some shadows cover half of characters' faces to show what kind of problems that they're dealing with inside their heads. And of course, they would also use the red lighting on Daredevil when he's in full costume and beating up a bunch of bad guys, showing that he is the man without fear. Now, I would say that this season is as good as the first season because it does take some of the stuff that I loved from the first season and does it a little better. But there's still one part in this show that I left out that I think is the weakest part of the show, and that is unfortunately Elektra. Now, the actress Elodie Young still does a great job as the character, it's just the way she was written was the problem, where when she's first introduced early on in the show, where she needs Matt's help to deal with some of the problems that got her into trouble, but it's also causing Matt to do some things that he regrets. But when you learn more about what's going on with her and why she's doing all this, when you get the full reveal of who she really is, there really isn't that much surprises or much to her after that. She's just a character that gets herself into trouble with some mob and gangs, and she has a crush on Matt. So unfortunately, Elektra is the weakest part of this season. Sure, she has some things that make her a little interesting, but unfortunately they're very minor things and aren't very well explored like they should have been. Also, no spoilers, but there is a subplot with the hand that I just mentioned that is set up in the future, but it's not for season 3 of Daredevil. Instead, it is set up for Iron Fist and the Defenders, which you have to pay attention to every detail in all 4 of these shows to understand more of what's going on in the Defenders. Yep, that is the kind of homework that you have to do if you're interested. But don't worry, if you don't want to learn more about the hand and you don't want to spend a lot of time consuming moments to watch all 4 of the shows, then you can just skip those and skip the Defenders and just get to season 3 of Daredevil instead, if you just want to focus more on the Daredevil stuff. And gratefully you can still watch season 3 without having to watch all the other shows, because season 3 does explain those events that happened. Daredevil season 2 is another great season where it takes the characters and put them in a very chaotic situation and has action sequences that I think are better than the action sequences in the first season, which were still great. I am gonna, however, give it the same grade though, and that is an A. So guys, stay tuned for my review for season 3 of Daredevil. I am very excited to talk about that, and I hope you guys are excited for that too. And what did you think of this season of Daredevil? Do you think it's as good as the first season, or do you think that this season isn't your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you like this video and you want to see me talk more about Daredevil, then please leave a like and subscribe to my channel so you don't miss a thing, because it helps my channel grow. Hit the notification bell so you know what other videos I'm posting. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.